first of all, we have to know who the perpetrators were, but let's assume, which is plausible, that it's the bin Laden network. Notice that doesn't necessarily mean bin Laden himself. It's possible that he's telling the truth when he said he had nothing to do with this particular act hidden away in some cave in Afghanistan. But the network that he helped establish, that's involved. We know a lot about that network. In fact, the CIA knows more about it than they're telling us because they helped set it up. This is a network that was established, as Brzezinski says, first as an effort to draw the Russians into the Afghan trap, assuming he's telling the truth, and then through the 1980s in an effort to cause maximal harm to the Soviet Union. In order to do this, the CIA, Pakistani intelligence, Saudi Arabia, help from others, Israel, Egypt, Britain, they rounded up the best killers they could find, who happened to be extreme radical fundamentalist Arabs. And there has now been blowback all over the world. Hamas in Palestine had its origins there. The Islamic Jihad in Egypt, which has been tearing the place apart, had their origins there. It's blowing back all over. But they set it up, they backed it, they gave them advanced armaments, including Stinger missiles, they trained them, and finally they carried out terrorist attacks inside Russia. Finally, the Russians pulled out. They hate the Russians, but at that point they stopped carrying out terrorist attacks in Russia, except in one case. They went to Chechnya, where they're fighting to resist the Russian atrocities there, and are carrying out terrorist attacks in Moscow. It's one of the reasons Moscow is happy to join this. They're hoping the U.S. will back them in their brutal repression in Chechnya. Also, they are involved in Western China, in the Uyghur uprising, and China, again, would be delighted to have the United States join in repressing them. But U.S. intelligence knows all about these people. They helped create them. And they have their own reasons, and they've told us what their reasons are, if we want to listen. There are plenty of in-depth interviews with bin Laden himself. There's a CIA profile on him. They're all pretty much the same. He was fighting a holy war to drive the Russians out of Afghanistan. When the U.S. established permanent military bases in Saudi Arabia, he says that he's going to fight a holy war to drive the U.S. out of Saudi Arabia, which is much more important to them because Saudi Arabia is the guardian of the holiest shrines and so on. The Saudi Arabian regime is a major target. It's the most fundamentalist Islamic regime in the world outside of the Taliban, but it doesn't satisfy their criteria. They want to get rid of the corrupt, and they are corrupt, brutal, authoritarian regimes in the Arab states, replace them with what they consider proper Muslim regimes, and defend Muslims around the world, in Chechnya and Western China and probably in Aceh and Indonesia, Algeria. Yes, that's what their plans are. And they've been perfectly frank about them, and they're perfectly willing to carry out violent terrorist actions to achieve these ends. It's not new. We may forget, but 20 years ago, in 1983, one suicide bomber in Lebanon drove the U.S. military out of Lebanon. Maybe we forgot. They didn't forget. There have been other cases since. Suicide bombers are fundamentally unstoppable. If people want to commit, are perfectly happy to commit suicide, there's endless numbers of ways in which they can succeed. So that's the particular category of the bin Laden network. Now they draw from a reservoir as a background, and the reservoir includes, with different levels of intensity, people from bankers and businessmen to the huge mass of poor and impoverished people who are being brutally oppressed very often. Over that range throughout the region, there's plenty of grievances, and they also tell you about them. So, for example, the Wall Street Journal, a day after the bombing, published a good story on the attitudes of wealthy Muslims. bankers, professionals, businessmen, and so on. They were very frank. They said they object to the fact that the United States is supporting harsh, authoritarian, anti-democratic governments throughout the region, that the U.S. is preventing independent economic development by propping up oppressive regimes, I'm quoting, and their prime concern, and that's everyone, is the decisive U.S. support for the Israeli military occupation, now going into its 35th year, harsh, brutal, oppressive. The U.S. is providing the diplomatic support, the military means for the settlement and the repression and everything else. They know that. Everybody knows that. It's been blocking efforts at diplomatic settlement for years, serious diplomatic settlement. That's on the one side, and that contrasts very sharply with U.S. policy towards Iraq. In the last 10 years, the United States has devastated the civilian society of Iraq. Maybe if Madeleine Albright gets up on television and is asked, what do you think about killing 500,000 children under 5? And she says, well, it's a high price, but we think it's worth it. Fine, maybe she thinks it's worth it, and the U.S. government apparently does. But that doesn't mean that the people in the Middle East think the price is worth it to kill 500,000 children while strengthening Saddam Hussein, which is exactly what they're doing. So you put these two policies side by side, and it's causing tremendous outrage. And that's the rich people. That's the pro-U.S. wealthy people. You go down to the streets or take a look at the people who are at the wrong end of the guns in the occupied territories or in Lebanon or the slums of Cairo or wherever you go, you get much more bitter reactions. And out of that background comes the kind of fury and desperation that can allow groups like the CIA organized bin Laden network to carry out their activities.